So, Ahsoka just wrapped up recently, and I finally had a chance to finish it. I am pleased to say that it was an overall solid series. Not amazing, not a big standout, but if anything, it's pretty good. So far, anyway, if there's going to be more, which I heard that there is going to be potentially more seasons. Seeing how the finale goes, there's plenty more where that came from. And Thrawn has got some plans up his sleeve by going to Dathomir. I guess I just gave it away. We're going to talk about some full spoilers here, so if you haven't seen the show somehow, get away, don't listen, don't watch. So basically Sabine gives in to Ray Stevens' manipulation by having her go to another galaxy to find Admiral Thrawn, and potentially for her, Sabine, to find Ezra Bridger, who's been missing for a while. Remember my video that I did on my first impressions of the first 2 episodes? I thought that the one character who looked like an Inquisitor was going to be Ezra, that they were going to pull some kind of a Jedi Fallen Order type of twist. Turns out that didn't happen. He was on this planet the entire time hanging with the local natives. And the actor that they chose, obviously not the same person, but the look and sound of this guy more or less fits how he is in the show. I guess the big disclaimer here, I still have yet to finish the entire series. I'm about maybe 3/4 of the way through the first season. I've seen enough of the show to understand what's going on, and I've heard some things from Star Wars fans from discussions about how the show wraps up and how Ezra eventually disappeared and certain characters went their separate ways. I know I was still somewhat lost by what was going on, but I felt like I got a decent enough sense of where things were by the time we saw the show, if you catch my drift. I know some people I know personally still hold it over my head that I need to see Rebels and the Clone Wars. I'm sorry guys, I got a lot of catching up to do, and I'm going to try to finish the Rebels series and watch the Clone Wars. I promise I'm gonna do it. Please stop asking me. I am going to. Please. I'm saying that as nicely as I can. I appreciate you guys wanting me to watch it, but when I find the time, I will watch it. I promise. Speaking of the Clone Wars, this show really goes full-on fan service, prequel fan service of the Clone Wars TV show. When Ahsoka supposedly dies by falling into that ocean, she wakes up in this limbo type of state and hears a voice behind her, and she turns around and sees Anakin Skywalker right in front of her. And it's still a joy to see Hayden Christensen get his swan song type of experience with Star Wars, because despite what revisionist historians will tell you, he didn't exactly receive a positive reception with his portrayal in the prequel trilogy. If Kenobi was any indication along with this is the Anakin Skywalker that we should have gotten all along. Although I'm not so sure if this was really Anakin Skywalker. Or at least not entirely. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I've heard some discussions go on about it, whether or not this was like the spirit of some kind of omnipresent being. Again, I am really lost on the lore of Star Wars, mostly. I don't know everything. I feel like this was some embodiment of maybe her fears or her regrets, maybe combined all into one along with the spirit of Anakin. It could be. Hearing his voice meld with James Earl Jones' voice when he says, "You lack conviction." Then you see a flash of him in the Darth Vader suit, and then it goes back to him as Anakin. Talk about chill-inducing imagery. I mean, whew. As a fan, I got a lot out of that. And we see a young Ahsoka Tano, played by the same actress who was young Gamora in Infinity War, and also was in the Barbie movie recently. Young girl's going places. Experiencing her first battle, seeing Anakin teach her, look, this is how war is, and you just have to deal with it. We get a small cameo from Captain Rex, casually standing there and then walks off into the smoke. Of course, fans of the Clone Wars and the wider scope of Star Wars were going to squeal their heads off with joy over that. It took me until I watched a Easter egg video from New Rockstars and Screen Crush to realize who that was. Although, I don't want to be too cruel here on Hayden Christensen because, again, really like what they're doing with him, but I found his acting to be kind of flat in this one, or not good. I don't know if it was direction or maybe they just didn't use the best take, but some of his delivery I thought, oh god, no, please don't do that again. Overall, his role in the show was fine, although I think he was better used in Kenobi. Just me. But I did really love at the end with his Force Ghost watching over Ahsoka and having this look of pride and compassion that he has for Ahsoka still. And I complained about the use of his Force Ghost in the special edition of Return of the Jedi, where how we see a young Force Ghost Anakin instead of the original actor that played him at the time in 1983. I still stand by what I said there a few months ago. That being said, in this situation, I think it was completely appropriate. I don't want to go into a big long tangent or anything, but while I did like seeing all the extra Easter eggs from the prequel era, people all over social media were just ogling and gushing over this stuff. If you're fans of it, that's totally fine. You can do that, but this to me is pretty obvious that they're really really spoon-feeding the prequel fans. And it almost makes me go, guys, can we please stop shoving the prequel stuff into everybody's faces? We get it, okay? The prequels are cool to love. I know that. Can we try to connect the dots to the sequels and try to make them more relevant? Just another symptom of the studios being afraid to touch anything related to the sequels because they know that the fans are going to blow their stack. Seriously. Can we try to connect to the sequels, please? On that note, with Lars Mikkelsen as Admiral Thrawn, if you don't know, he was actually a character in the EU, the Expanded Universe lore, before Disney bought the franchise from George Lucas. And he's one of the few legend characters that are being incorporated into this new continuity. He's mentioned by Ahsoka Tano in Season 2 of Mandalorian when she's fighting that one magistrate, whose role in this series is to find Grand Admiral Thrawn and try to come up with whatever plan that they have in mind. This is obviously the Imperial remnant that he's leading. Now, my assumption, if I'm reading into this correctly, I'm willing to bet that he's probably going to be the catalyst of the First Order rising. Of course, we hear a mention of Operation Necromancer in Season 3 of Mandalorian. Of course, that being in connection to Palpatine's return. I'm willing to bet that Thrawn's going to have a hand in this somehow. Could be totally wrong about this, but I would not rule that out just yet. They say long live the Empire, so it doesn't really surprise me that the Empire's still operating in some shape or form, and would explain somehow why the First Order came to be 30 years after the fact. Not to mention that we see how bureaucratic and incompetent the New Republic is in this situation. They're clearly ignoring the red flags that the Empire's still out there somehow. Still, we don't know the full picture yet. We'll find that out in time. As for Lars Mikkelsen as Thrawn, very subdued and calm and soft-spoken, but in its own way very scary. And Lars Mikkelsen, I guess, like his relative Mads Mikkelsen, who I guess is his brother? Yep, I just looked it up. He is his brother. There were a couple of times where I actually thought it was Mads Mikkelsen and all that makeup. This is my introduction to Grand Admiral Thrawn. I'm not just talking about not having seen the Rebels TV show. I have actually never really read any of the books. I have the Thrawn trilogy books somewhere in my boxes, but I never went out of my way to read any of them. But I know he's a big deal in Star Wars, and the fact that they're bringing him into this new continuity, that should tell you something. When it comes to Ahsoka and her friendship with Sabine, this, I think, in a way, is her maybe making up for what Anakin failed to do with her, or at least how she sees it. I don't know exactly what the arc was supposed to be with her seeing the vision of Anakin. I've heard some people discuss it. I'm still trying to process all that, I'll admit. I think what the intention was, and I could be totally wrong here, that she's trying to let go of all those regrets and hang-ups that she feels about leaving Anakin like she did. She doesn't want Sabine to do the exact same thing. Now, Sabine is feeling some hurt over not being able to see Ezra, at least until she finds him on that planet. Her being a Mandalorian is also a very unique type of blend. And even though she caves in to finding Ezra, it's actually quite surprising to me that Ahsoka didn't blow up on her. Then again, I guess, what good would that do? And when it comes to Ahsoka's demeanor throughout this whole show, I'm actually quite relieved that she didn't go so over the top. Because I've heard some people say that Rosario Dawson was bad or just going through the motions. I thought she was fine. Maybe I'm just reading too much into this. I have no idea. I'm willing to bet she was using some of the same techniques that she was taught by the Jedi Order to be in control of her emotions. I know it's not fully emphasized in the show, but for myself, I could easily see that. I just fill the gaps in my own head. Also, it is kind of relieving to see our main protagonist not be so over the top with the crying and the screaming and the agonizing based on her past history and what she's been dealt with. She keeps it all very subdued and doesn't really react, only reacts at certain times. And all the extra bits of lore that we do get, the space whales, I know there's an official term for those guys, but I don't remember them off the top of my head, so please don't slay me for not remembering. The Night Sisters, who we see in Jedi Fallen Order, they turn the Magistrate into one of them, or I think she's one of the remaining ones, or the last remaining ones, and they bring her back into the Sisterhood. They even turn the Stormtroopers into Nightwalkers or Daywalkers. I mean, as soon as they started to get back up and fight Ezra, Sabine, and Ahsoka, I thought, what is this, the Night of the Living Dead? And I thought it was kind of funny how Ahsoka said, this has never happened before, has it? Ezra goes, no. This is different. As for what they're doing with Ray Stevenson's character, I'm not exactly sure. I feel like they're building towards something with him that maybe he's having doubts about the Empire. But since Ray Stevenson has passed away, I don't really know how they're going to continue this with another season if there's going to be one. There's a whole lot that I'm not mentioning right now, but if I try to mention every single detail, I'm going to be here for about 12 hours because there's a lot of stuff to cover here. But aesthetically, the show is pristine. It's perfect. I mean, if anyone is slightly familiar with Dave Filoni's work, his fingerprints, as I said before, they are all over this thing. If you ask me, he and Jon Favreau should be the one in charge of Lucasfilm. Yeah, I said it. And no, I'm not talking about them retconning the sequels because that's clearly not going to happen. Anyone who says otherwise, you've heard me say it before, don't believe a word of it. Filoni and Favreau are not going to retcon anything. They've said before multiple times they're building towards that. I mean, if Filoni was able to unite the fans by creating the Clone Wars and Rebels, or at least have a creative hand in those things, more than likely he's going to do it again with the sequels. You never know, depending on how it goes anyway. He's making a Mandoverse movie. That should actually bring some people together. And he's approved Daisy Ridley to come back as Rey for her solo movie. I know he's not making the movie. He might have some executive producer credit for it. But if anything, I think we could count on Dave Filoni to put some of that energy back into Star Wars again. I mean, if J.J. Abrams was the start, Filoni and Favreau could be the continuation of it. But yeah, overall, really solid series. Still have a lot of catching up to do with Rebels and Clone Wars, but even so, I was more than pleased with the final result. If you're gonna ask me what my ranking is of all these shows from Star Wars, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. For one, they haven't fully concluded yet. I mean, Andor still has another season coming. Ahsoka might get a season 2. Wouldn't be shocked. Kenobi, I wouldn't bet on any more stuff coming, unless they make a short film of it of some kind. Once the Mandoverse movie comes out, then I think we can talk. Oh, and can I just say, the musical score by Kevin Kiner, particularly in the end credits of each episode, really neat score. Very fitting, I guess, for this side of Star Wars, while still having that operatic, adventurous feel that John Williams would incorporate, along with the artwork that they throw into the end credits, easily reminded me of Marvel's Eternals. I know some people would cry foul over that reference, but hey, I just couldn't help but see the comparisons. So those are my thoughts on Ahsoka. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are if you've seen the show. And as always, see you in the next one.